The twin sons of Horg Prime cast a harsh, relentless light over the sprawling estate of Michael London, reflecting off its towering spires and casting long shadows across the bustling courtyards. In the heart of this gilded prison, Lyra toiled, her hands raw from scrubbing the marble floors that gleamed under the merciless suns. Her blonde hair, once radiant, now hung in tangled knots around her face, a testament to the years of neglect and abuse she had endured. Her skin, light and delicate, bore the scars of a life spent in chains, each mark a story of cruelty and survival. Lyra's mind wandered as she worked, recalling fragments of a past that seemed like a distant dream. She had been a child when the slavers came, tearing her from her family and casting her into a life of servitude. The memories of her parents' warm smiles and the laughter of her siblings were faded and fragmented, like shards of glass catching the light for a brief, painful moment before slipping back into darkness. For 20 years she had been passed from one cruel master to another, each one more brutal than the last. Yet, through it all, a flicker of hope had remained, a stubborn ember that refused to be extinguished. Michael London, her current master, was the epitome of malevolence. His reputation as a notorious slave trader had earned him wealth and power, and he reveled in his status. His estate was a testament to his success, filled with opulent decorations and lavish furnishings that spoke of his ill-gotten gains. Michael's cruelty was well known, and he took a particular interest in breaking the spirits of those under his control. Lyra was his latest obsession, and he was determined to bend her to his will, to crush the last remnants of hope that flickered in her eyes. Lyra, Michael's voice boomed through the hall, jolting her from her reverie. She stood quickly, bowing her head as he approached, his heavy footsteps echoing ominously. "Yes, master," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. Michael's gaze was cold and calculating as he surveyed her. "Tonight is an important night," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm hosting an event for some very influential guests. You will be present, and you will behave accordingly. Do not forget your place." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding. She knew what such events entailed: a parade of power and wealth, a display of Michael's control over his slaves. But tonight there was something different in his eyes, a glint of something more sinister. She shivered involuntarily as he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As the day wore on, preparations for the event began in earnest. The estate buzzed with activity as servants rushed to and fro, setting up decorations, preparing food, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. Lyra was given a simple yet elegant dress to wear, a stark contrast to her usual rags. The dress was a reminder of her role tonight, not just a servant, but a spectacle, a prize to be shown off to Michael's guests. The evening descended, and the estate transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and music. Guests began to arrive, their laughter and conversations filling the air with an oppressive sense of revelry. Lyra stood quietly in a corner, her eyes downcast, as she watched the proceedings. She felt a familiar mix of anger and despair rise within her as she saw the smug faces of the wealthy elite, their opulence a sharp contrast to her own suffering. Lyra stood to the side, her light skin and blonde hair stark against the backdrop of the dark mahogany walls. She wore a dress of deep emerald green, chosen to highlight her striking beauty. Despite her outward composure, her heart hammered in her chest. The chain around her wrist, though hidden beneath layers of silk, was a constant reminder of her captivity. She dared not show the flicker of hope that still burned within her, a small, defiant flame that refused to be extinguished. Michael London, a tall man with a lean, predatory grace, moved through the crowd, his eyes glinting with pride and ambition. He paused occasionally to exchange pleasantries, his gaze occasionally flicking to Lyra. He had plans for her, plans that involved breaking her spirit and adding her to his harem of concubines. As the night wore on, Michael's voice rose above the crowd, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his tone dripping with pride, "I have a special presentation for you tonight. Allow me to introduce one of my most prized possessions, Lyra." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to her. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat as she stepped forward, her heart pounding. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, refusing to meet the eyes of the crowd. She could feel their gaze upon her, a mixture of curiosity and disdain. as if she were nothing more than an object for their amusement. Michael's hand gripped her arm, pulling her closer to him. "This one has been difficult to tame," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But I assure you, she will soon learn her place." Lyra's mind raced as she stood beside him, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and defiance. She could not allow herself to break, not now, not ever. She clung to the flicker of hope that had kept her alive all these years, the belief that one day she would be free. Just as Michael was about to continue, a sudden commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. The grand double doors at the end of the hall swung open with a resounding crash, silencing the room. All eyes turned to the entrance, where a column of black-armored figures marched in, their presence imposing and otherworldly. The leader, a tall man with a chiseled jaw and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the room with calculated intensity. Commander Joseph, head of the White Eagles, exuded an air of authority and danger. Michael's smile widened as he approached the commander, extending a hand in greeting. "Commander Joseph, welcome to my humble abode. It's an honor to host the White Eagles." Joseph's handshake was firm, his expression inscrutable. "Michael London, your reputation precedes you. We appreciate your invitation and your willingness to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." As they moved to a secluded corner of the hall, the tension was palpable. The guests whispered among themselves, eyes darting between the imposing figures of the White Eagles and their host. Lyra, though standing at a distance, felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about Joseph's gaze that unsettled her, as if he could see through the layers of her facade. The negotiations began, a dance of words and power. Joseph spoke of valuable planets, strategic alliances, and the potential for great wealth. Michael listened intently, his mind calculating and assessing the opportunities presented. But beneath the surface, a more sinister plan was unfolding. Joseph's eyes flicked to Lyra, lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Michael noticed, and a sly smile curved his lips. "I see something has caught your eye, Commander. Lyra is one of my prized possessions, a true gem among my collection." Joseph's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, interest, perhaps, or a hidden agenda. "She is indeed striking," he said, his tone even. "But let us focus on the matter at hand." The negotiations continued, the air thick with tension and unspoken threats. Lyra's heart pounded as she listened, straining to catch every word. She knew that whatever deal was being struck, it would not bode well for her or the other slaves. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew heavier, the sense of impending violence palpable. And then, in a sudden, decisive move, Joseph's demeanor shifted. With a swift, fluid motion, he drew a sleek, black blade from his belt and plunged it into Michael's side. The room erupted into chaos. Michael's scream was cut short as Joseph twisted the blade, his expression cold and unyielding. The White Eagles sprang into action, their movements precise and deadly. Guests screamed and scrambled for the exits, their lavish attire tangling and tearing in the panic. Lyra's mind raced as she backed away, her eyes wide with shock. She saw Michael's guards engaging in a desperate battle with the White Eagles, but they were no match for the elite warriors. Bodies fell, blood splattering the once pristine marble floors. Amid the chaos, Lyra's gaze locked onto a figure moving with calculated precision. Luke Decker, a member of the Lauren Special Forces, cut through the fray, his eyes scanning the room. When they met Lyra's, there was a moment of recognition, a silent promise of rescue. Luke reached her in a few swift strides, his expression calm and reassuring despite the bedlam around them. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm here to help." Nodding, Lyra followed Luke, as he led her through the crumbling corridors of the estate. The sounds of battle echoed around them, the clash of weapons, the shouts of men, and the occasional explosion that sent tremors through the ground. Each step they took was a step closer to freedom, yet the danger seemed to grow with every corner they turned. They came upon a grand staircase, its once pristine steps now strewn with debris. Luke scanned the area, his military training evident in the way he moved, always alert, always ready. He gestured for Lyra to stay back as he approached the staircase, checking for threats. Satisfied it was clear, he motioned for her to follow. As they ascended, Lyra felt the weight of her past begin to lift, the chains that had bound her spirit for so long falling away with each step. But they were not out of danger yet. The mansion was a labyrinth, and Michael's guards were relentless. They reached the upper levels, where the sounds of battle were more distant, replaced by the eerie silence of abandoned wealth. Luke led her into a luxurious bedroom, its opulence a stark contrast to the violence outside. He paused by the window, peering out into the night. "We're almost there," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Just a bit further, and we'll be clear." Suddenly, the door burst open, and a guard lunged at Luke, his eyes wild with desperation. Luke reacted swiftly, deflecting the guard's attack and countering with a precise blow that sent the man sprawling. But more were coming. The noise had drawn their attention. "Go," Luke shouted to Lyra. "Get to the window and climb down. I'll hold them off." Lyra's eyes widened with fear, but she knew there was no time to argue. She ran to the window, her fingers fumbling with the latch. Behind her, she heard the sounds of struggle, Luke's grunts of effort as he fought off their pursuers. The window finally gave way, and Lyra climbed out, finding herself on a narrow ledge. Below, the garden stretched out, dark and silent. Taking a deep breath, she began to climb down, her movements quickened by the urgency of escape. When she reached the ground, she looked back up to see Luke at the window, fending off the last of the guards. He glanced down at her, his face set with determination. "Run, Lyra," he called. "I'll catch up." She didn't need to be told twice. With her heart in her throat, Lyra ran, her feet pounding the earth as she made her way through the gardens. The night air was cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the burning mansion behind her. She could hear the distant shouts of the white eagles, the clash of steel, but she kept moving, driven by the singular focus of survival. She reached the edge of the estate, where a tall fence loomed before her. Gathering her strength, she began to climb, her fingers gripping the cold metal. As she reached the top, she glanced back to see Luke emerging from the mansion, his silhouette framed by the firelight. He ran towards her, his movements swift and purposeful. Lyra dropped down to the other side of the fence, her knees buckling slightly upon impact. She steadied herself, turning to see Luke scaling the fence with ease. He landed beside her, a small smile playing on his lips, despite the dire circumstances. "Let's keep moving," he said, his voice breathless but steady. They ran through the darkened streets, the sounds of battle fading behind them. The city was eerily quiet, the residents having retreated into their homes to escape the violence. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of freedom, of a future that seemed just within reach. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a safe house on the outskirts of the city. Luke knocked on the door in a coded pattern, and it swung open to reveal a group of Lauren's Special Forces members. They ushered Lyra and Luke inside, the door closing behind them with a reassuring thud. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. The team was already debriefing, planning their next moves. Luke guided Lyra to a corner where she could sit and catch her breath. He crouched beside her, his eyes full of concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand gently touching her arm. Lyra nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm free," she whispered, the reality of it finally sinking in. "I'm really free." Luke smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Yes, you are, and we'll make sure you stay that way." In that moment, surrounded by her rescuers, and with Luke by her side, Lyra felt a flicker of hope ignite into a blazing flame. Her journey was far from over, but she knew that with Luke and the Lauren Special Forces, she had a chance at a new life, one filled with freedom, healing, and the promise of a brighter future. The ship hummed gently as it cruised through the star-speckled expanse of space. Lyra sat in a small, cozy cabin, the first private space she'd ever had. Her blonde hair, once tangled and dull from years of neglect, now shimmered under the soft light. Her light skin had regained some color, the bruises and scars slowly fading. She stared out of the window, watching the galaxies swirl in the distance. It was a sight she never thought she would see. The Lauren Special Forces ship was a sanctuary for Lyra. Luke Decker, her rescuer and now her constant companion, had ensured she had everything she needed. Each member of the crew treated her with a respect she had never known. At first, Lyra had been wary, her body tense and ready to flinch at any sudden movement. But as days turned into weeks, the warmth and kindness of the crew began to seep into her soul, thawing the ice that had encased her heart for so long. One evening, Luke found Lyra in the common area, a place where the crew often gathered to relax. She was curled up on a large, cushioned chair, a holographic book hovering in front of her. The title, Legends of the Stars, caught his eye. "Good choice," Luke said, sitting down across from her. "That was one of my favorites growing up." Lyra looked up, her blue eyes meeting his. There was a spark there, a flicker of life that had been absent for so long. It's beautiful," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I never knew there were stories like this." Luke smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. "There's so much more out there, Lyra, so much beauty and wonder, and you deserve to experience all of it." Their conversations became a nightly ritual. Luke would find Lyra with a new book or exploring the ship's vast library of knowledge. They talked about everything: the stars, the history of the Galactic Alliance, and even shared personal stories. Luke spoke of his childhood, his training, and the missions that had shaped him into the man he was. Lyra, in turn, shared snippets of her past, the few happy memories she held onto, and the endless days of darkness and pain. One night, as they stood on the observation deck, the vastness of space stretching out before them, Lyra found herself leaning against Luke's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Luke wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes. "I know," she whispered back. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." As they traveled from one star system to another, Lyra's recovery was not just physical but emotional. Luke's patience and kindness helped her rediscover herself. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. He was simply there, a steady presence, a rock she could lean on. One day, while they were stationed on a serene planet with lush green landscapes and crystal-clear lakes, Luke took Lyra to a secluded spot by a waterfall. The sound of the water crashing down was soothing, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. "Close your eyes," Luke said, taking her hand. Lyra did as he asked, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "Now, take a deep breath." "What do you feel?" he asked. Lyra took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. "I feel alive," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I feel hope." Luke squeezed her hand. "That's what I wanted you to feel," he said. "Hope is what keeps us going. It's what gives us the strength to face whatever comes our way." Lyra opened her eyes and looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Luke," she said, "for everything. For saving me, for giving me hope." Luke brushed a tear from her cheek. "You don't have to thank me, Lyra," he said. "I'm just glad I found you. And I promise I'll always be here for you." As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. They shared their hopes and dreams, their fears and insecurities. They laughed together, cried together, and slowly but surely, Lyra's heart began to heal. The nightmares that had plagued her for years began to fade, replaced by dreams of a future filled with love and happiness. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Luke turned to Lyra, his eyes filled with determination. "Lyra, I know you've been through so much, and I can't even begin to imagine the pain you've endured. But I want you to know that I'm here for you, now and always. And I will do everything in my power to make sure you never have to feel that pain again." Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I know, Luke," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I believe you." And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the universe and the warmth of Luke's love, Lyra knew that she was truly free. Free to live, free to love, and free to hope for a better future. The starship glided smoothly through the azure skies of the Galactic Alliance's capital world, a planet known for its majestic cities and verdant landscapes. The sprawling metropolis of Lumina Prime sparkled below, a testament to the unity and progress of countless civilizations. For Lyra, This world represented more than just a destination, it was the beginning of a new life. As they descended towards the spaceport, Lyra marveled at the architectural wonders that dotted the horizon. Towering spires of glass and metal reflected the sunlight, creating a kaleidoscope of colors. Green parks and serene water features interspersed the urban landscape, providing a balance of nature and technology. Lyra felt a sense of awe and hope, emotions she had almost forgotten during her years of captivity. Luke Decker, standing by her side, noticed the wonder in her eyes. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly, his voice filled with warmth. Lyra turned to him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Yes, it is. It's more than I ever imagined." The ship landed gracefully, and the ramp extended. A delegation awaited them, representatives of the Galactic Alliance eager to welcome the heroes who had dismantled Michael London's oppressive regime. As Lyra and Luke stepped onto the platform, a chorus of applause greeted them. Lyra felt a mix of humility and pride, her past suffering giving way to the present joy. Amidst the formalities and speeches, Lyra's eyes sought Luke's, finding solace in his steady gaze. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise of support and love. The delegation led them through the bustling spaceport to a grand hall adorned with banners representing the various member planets of the Galactic Alliance. In the grand hall, Lyra and Luke were introduced to dignitaries and leaders, their achievements praised in speeches that highlighted their bravery and compassion. Despite the grandeur of the occasion, Lyra felt a sense of surrealism. Only a short time ago, she had been a slave, her future bleak and uncertain. Now, she stood among the galaxy's leaders, a symbol of hope and resilience. After the formalities, Lyra and Luke were given a private moment in a serene garden adjacent to the hall. The garden was a sanctuary of peace, with vibrant flowers and gentle streams that provided a calming atmosphere. Lyra breathed deeply, savoring the fragrance of blooming flowers and the sound of trickling water. Luke led her to a secluded bench beneath a flowering tree. "I thought you might need a moment away from all the attention," he said with a soft smile. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt. "Thank you, Luke, for everything." He took her hands in his expression earnest. "Lyra, there's something I need to say." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were special. Your strength, your courage, and your unbreakable spirit have touched me deeply. I've fallen in love with you, Lyra, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Lyra's heart raced as Luke knelt before her, pulling a small, intricately crafted ring from his pocket. "Lyra, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Lyra's eyes, a mixture of joy and disbelief. She had never imagined finding love, let alone someone as kind and brave as Luke. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Luke, I will marry you." Luke slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, the world around them fading as they shared a kiss that sealed their promise. Their love, born out of turmoil and struggle, now blossomed in the light of a new beginning. The news of their engagement spread quickly, and the subsequent celebration was filled with laughter and joy. Friends from the Lauren Special Forces joined them, sharing stories and toasts to the couple's future. For Lyra, it was a night of healing and acceptance, the scars of her past slowly fading as she embraced her new life. In the days that followed, Lyra and Luke dedicated themselves to building a future together. They established a foundation to aid former slaves and oppressed individuals across the galaxy, using their resources and connections to make a difference. Their efforts were met with widespread support, and they became symbols of hope and resilience. As they worked to help others, their bond grew stronger. They explored the capital world, discovering its hidden gems and sharing moments of tranquility amidst their busy lives. Luke's unwavering support and love provided Lyra with the strength to heal, and she, in turn, inspired him with her resilience and compassion. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the balcony of their new home, Lyra turned to Luke. "We've come so far," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Luke nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "And we'll go even further, together." Lyra smiled, her heart full. "Yes, together." Their journey was far from over, but they faced the future with confidence and hope. Their love had become a beacon of light in the galaxy, guiding others towards a brighter tomorrow. As they stood hand in hand, the stars above them shone brightly, a testament to the enduring power of love and hope among the stars.